The artisan of the dust and the Sufi heart. In ancient times, nestled at the foothills of a great mountain range, lay a small and serene town where life moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. At the very edge of this town, where the rugged rocky cliffs began, stood a dilapidated, mud brick hut. In this humble dwelling lived a young man of about 22 named Farid. Farid had no one left in this world, no parents, no siblings, and no relatives. He was entirely alone, but instead of making him bitter or despairing, this solitude had gifted him with a deeply spiritual, Sufi-like temperament and immense patience. Farid's profession was arduous. He would wake up at the break of dawn, offer his morning prayers, and head toward the mountains carrying his only assets, a heavy hammer and a sharp chisel. He spent his days breaking rocks under the scorching sun and harsh weather, and then, with the sheer artistry of his hands, he transformed those lifeless stones into beautiful utensils, grinding stones, and exquisite decorative pieces. Inside his hut sat an old wooden workbench where he spent hours carving intricate patterns onto the stones. Whenever his chisel struck the rock, the rhythmic blows created a unique melody that felt like a quiet, mystical chant. Farid was a man of few words, but his heart was constantly alive with the remembrance of the divine. When he took his handmade stone vessels to the town market, greedy and arrogant merchants would mock his poverty. "Hey, Farid, these rocks aren't worth what you're asking. They are just ordinary pieces of the mountain," a wealthy shopkeeper would laugh. Farid never grew angry. He would simply bow his head with a gentle smile and say, "Sir, the price is not for the stone, but for the labor, love, and time I spent making it useful. As for sustenance, Allah is the provider, not man. Whatever he has written in my destiny will find its way to me." Every evening, while returning home from the market, Farid chose a specific, quiet, and longer route. This path ran alongside the grand estate of the town's wealthiest and most influential nobleman, Malik Hashim. The mansion was as magnificent as a fortress, surrounded by towering walls that hid a vast, lush green garden within. Whenever Farid passed by, he kept his gaze strictly lowered to the ground. The desire to peer into the palaces of the rich never crossed his mind, for he firmly believed that guarding one's gaze is the ultimate shield of human character. The captive of the mansion and the gust of wind. Malik Hashim had an only daughter named Alia. Alia was the epitome of grace and beauty, with eyes that held a profound depth, but her life was overshadowed by a great tragedy. Due to a severe illness in her childhood, she had lost the use of both her legs and was unable to walk. She spent her days sitting in a beautifully crafted wooden wheelchair in the magnificent garden of the mansion, watching time pass by. Alia possessed every luxury the world could offer, expensive garments, delectable feasts, and an army of servants, yet she was profoundly lonely inside. She knew that her physical disability had become her greatest vulnerability. Noblemen and wealthy merchants from all over the town came to her father's doorstep with marriage proposals, but the moment they discovered Alia could not walk, they would either back away or demand outrageous conditions to inherit her father's wealth. Alia would often sit alone in the garden, looking up at the sky with tears in her eyes, whispering, "O Creator, is this disability my entire world? Is there no one who can see my soul, rather than my wealth or my weakness?" One autumn evening, a fierce, chilly wind was blowing through the town. Farid was walking past the high walls of the mansion, his tool bag slung over his shoulder and his head bowed as usual. At that very moment, Alia was sitting in her wheelchair in the garden, admiring the shifting colors of nature. She wore a highly valuable, emerald green silk shawl over her head, intricately embroidered with fine gold threads. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through the garden. The wind lifted the precious silk shawl from Alia's head, carried it high over the towering walls of the mansion, and dropped it right into the dusty street, directly at Farid's feet. Farid stopped dead in his tracks. He looked down and saw a delicate, priceless shawl that had narrowly escaped being ruined in the dirt. He picked it up with the utmost respect. Any ordinary person might have tried to peer over the wall or contemplated selling such an expensive item in the market, but Farid's integrity was of a different caliber. He did not look up even for a fraction of a second. Instead, he gently dusted off the dirt, folded the shawl neatly, and placed it reverently on a clean stone near the mansion's massive iron gates. Without a word, he continued walking toward his hut. Inside the garden, Alia watched the entire scene unfold through a small, latticed opening in the wall. She was left stunned. In a town where people had gone blind in the pursuit of wealth and greed, here was a poor, shabbily dressed young man who didn't try to steal the shawl, nor did he even bother to look up to see who it belonged to. Farid's noble character left an indelible mark on Alia's heart. The dust of conspiracy and the light of trust. Malik Hashim had a nephew named Kashif. Kashif was a decadent, greedy, and deceitful man whose sole focus was to inherit Malik Hashim's vast estate and fortune. He wanted to marry Alia by any means necessary so that he could become the sole master of the empire after her father's passing. Kashif frequented the mansion and had noticed Farid passing by the outer wall on multiple occasions. When Kashif learned that Alia had praised the conduct of the poor stone carver, a fire of jealousy ignited in his heart. Viewing Farid as an obstacle in his path, he began to poison Malik Hashim's ears. One day, Kashif approached Malik Hashim in private and said, "Uncle, I have been noticing a poor stone carver named Farid, who lives in a miserable mud hut, hanging around our mansion every single day. His intentions do not seem right to me. I fear he is keeping an eye on our wealth, or worse, harbor ill intentions toward Alia's honor. We must take strict action immediately." Malik Hashim was a proud and protective father, and his daughter's honor was dearer to him than life itself. Swayed by Kashif's manipulation, he ordered the immediate closure of all gates facing that specific path the very next day and stationed armed guards along the walls to ensure no one could linger there. When Farid passed by the next evening, he found the atmosphere completely transformed. The guards glared at him suspiciously, but not a single wrinkle of distress appeared on Farid's forehead. He thought to himself, "The wealthy have their own affairs and their own ways of protecting themselves, it is none of my business." He simply lowered his gaze and walked past quietly, just as he always did. That night, Farid fell into a deep prostration during his prayers, crying out of devotion, "O my sustainer! Keep my heart pure from jealousy, greed, and evil thoughts. Never let me become a source of trial or dishonor for anyone. I am content with the poverty you have decreed for me, just keep my faith intact." The hour of trial and the true witness. A few weeks passed. Malik Hashim's health began to deteriorate rapidly, and he became consumed by worry over what would happen to his disabled daughter after he was gone. He gathered the town's elders, wealthy merchants, and his nephew Kashif in a grand assembly to make a final decision regarding Alia's future and marriage. Kashif believed the moment had finally arrived for his uncle to hand Alia's responsibility over to him. He stepped forward arrogantly and said, "Uncle, Alia is my utmost honor. Despite her disability, I will take complete care of her and manage your vast business empire with dedication." Sitting in that same assembly was a deeply respected, elderly, and pious man named Sayan Rahman, who was well aware of Farid's exceptional character and his honesty in the market. Malik Hashim turned toward the curtained partition where his daughter was seated and asked, "My daughter, Kashif is your cousin and is ready to take up your responsibility. What is your decision?" From behind the curtain, Alia's calm yet firm voice resonated through the hall. "Father, a man who wants to marry me out of charity for my disability while eyeing my wealth and property is someone I can never spend a single moment of peace with. If you wish to see my true destiny, summon the man who passes by our walls every day, the one with torn shoes on his feet, but the greatest modesty and purity in his eyes." Kashif boiled with rage and shouted, "What are you saying, Alia? A common stone cutter who spends his entire day covered in dust and mud will become the son-in-law of this grand mansion?" At that moment, Sayan Rahman stood up from his seat and addressed the assembly in a loud, commanding voice, "Malik Hashim, your daughter speaks the absolute truth. I have observed this young man, Farid, in the market. People mock his poverty and undervalue his work, but he has never spoken a lie, never deceived anyone, and his trust in God is so unwavering that the wealthiest of men look insignificant before him. He may be poor in material wealth, but his character and soul are richer than any king." Malik Hashim took a deep breath and commanded his guards to bring Farid to the mansion with full respect. The true bond and timeless love. Within a short time, Farid entered the magnificent court of the mansion. He wore the same simple, clean, yet patched clothes, and his hands were hardened and calloused from breaking stones, but his face radiated an unusual light of peace and contentment. Stepping into the hall, he bowed respectfully and fixed his eyes firmly on the ground. Malik Hashim walked up to Farid and asked, "Farid, do you know that my daughter Alia cannot stand on her own feet? She is paralyzed. If I place her hand in yours, will you be able to bear the responsibility of a disabled girl? Can you fill her life with happiness?" Farid took a deep breath, sincerity gleaming in his eyes, and replied in a gentle, impactful tone, "Respected Malik Hashim Sahib, women are never a burden in this world. They are a source of blessing and mercy sent by the Almighty. I do not own a palace, nor do I have silk beds to offer, but by the grace of God, I earn a halal livelihood, and I promise you that not a single morsel of forbidden wealth will ever sustain your daughter. As for her illness and disability, healing and the ultimate running of life belong solely to Allah. I am merely a humble human being. I can offer her love, give her utmost respect, and devote myself to her service. Hearing these words, tears welled up in Malik Hashim's eyes. He turned to Kashif and said with disdain, Kashif, you were thirsty for my wealth, but this young man is ready to protect my daughter's honor, soul, and responsibility. I could not find a better man for my daughter. Right then and there, without any worldly pomp or extravagant noise, a simple, dignified, and blessed marriage ceremony nikah was performed, uniting Alia and Farid. A few days later, the scene had beautifully transformed. Farid still walked past the same path, but now his shoulders carried not just his tools, but the profound joy of a home. The gates of the mansion's garden were now open forever. Alia no longer sat alone and sorrowful in her wheelchair. Farid was by her side, sharing stories of the beautiful universe and singing praises of the Creator. Alia had found a true companion in return for her patience, and Farid had been rewarded for his modesty and absolute trust in the divine. The moral of the story. This story teaches us that true and lasting relationships are never dependent on worldly wealth, status, or outward physical perfection. They are forged through pure intentions, modesty, patience, and complete faith in God. When a person guards their gaze and preserves their character, the Almighty rewards their patience with the most beautiful destiny.